welcome to episode number 85 of the Eavesdrop podcast. We have a very special guest today, a good friend of mine for the last couple of years. We first met when you made an investment into Infinite through Deep Space Ventures. Mr. Stephan Hayes, who is now an investor in mental health startups.
That's right.
You seem shorter today. It might be the chair.
I think I'm sitting down here, kind of hanging out. It's comfy down here.
Is it to me? Because you're way taller than me. So let me do this so I don't feel weird anymore. There you go. You're usually like talking down. I'm like, yeah. No, right now it looked weird. Reversing the role. How you been?
Good, man. Good to be here. This place is awesome.
Thank
Nostalgia.
you.
I mean, this is my childhood's on your wall.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. It's cool. You mentioned the Super Mario Brothers 3 cover art, and I think that this is by far the best cover art of any video game in the history of video games, or this is the only one that when I look at it, I see, well, one, an unattainable thing, because at the time we were in Juarez and, you know, I couldn't get it, and my cousin did. And I played it nonstop, but I remember like wanting to own it because I love the artwork. I was being an artist and a cartoonist or whatever. Like I loved the lettering, the HECZ that the blue and red give you. It's called HECZ because it like tricks your eyes. Don't give me that look, Matt. But yeah, against the yellow background, like it did so much for me that I just like I love it. It's like so I got a super new one.
That's cool.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get into it, man. Give me a little bit of background about you, and then we'll go into the esports and then the mental health, which is what I want to discuss.
Sure. So, I mean, my path to where I am today is a little bit all over the place. I mean, I went to college at West Point, so I was in the Army, first job out of college, if you want to call it that. And then after that, I had a couple of odd jobs after the Army, and then I ended up getting an MBA at Vanderbilt. Wore my Vanderbilt shirt today.
Yeah.
I moved to New York City after that. I was an investment banker. I did the whole investment banking thing, if you want to call it that, for about 7 years. Mergers and acquisitions, IPOs, high yield bonds, helping companies raise money and buy other companies. And then in 2015, I started a family office-backed venture fund that invested in all kinds of stuff, and one of the focus areas was esports. We made 8 investments in esports startups and businesses.
When you say venture funds, explain that a little bit to the people that are watching.
Sure. So there's all types of asset classes. All right. So everybody knows about stocks, right? And everybody knows about bonds. Everybody has a banking account, and those are all assets. And some assets are really risky and some are not very risky. Your checking account is very not risky. Buying a stock can be pretty risky, but investing in a startup that is illiquid, I mean, you can't trade the equity, you can't get the money out if you wanted to, usually, is even more risky. But these investors expect massive returns.
Yeah.
And so I took a lot of what I learned on Wall Street and sort of turned that into a venture investing business where I was going out and finding startups and deploying money into them and helping them grow for the purpose of sort of giving that risk return profile to my investors because they were hungry for it.
Yeah. So essentially investing in a startup is like super risky because, like you just said, you can't take your money out. You can't say, hey, I know I give you $1 million. You've spent 500. I'm not seeing that much return. Give me my other 500 back.
It doesn't work that way. Yeah. So like if you buy Apple stock and you decide
or GameStop stock.
Yeah. You buy GameStop stock at $3 a share, a year ago, and it's worth 100 today. You can go to your Fidelity account or your E-Trade account and you can sell it tomorrow. So if I have Apple stock, I can buy it anytime. I can sell it anytime. If I buy stock in a startup, I can buy it, but I can't really sell it. So that illiquidity creates risk that is greater than the risk you would take if you bought Apple stock. But for that risk, you're usually rewarded with the opportunity to make a lot more than you could make in Apple stock or a public stock.
Yeah.
But sometimes you lose that money. So it's ultimate risk, ultimate return.
Got it.
In the startup game.
Okay. And you said you've made 8 of those investments through Deep Space Ventures.
Deep Space made 25 total investments.
How did you get into Deep Space Ventures?
So,
like, give me that background.
Yeah. So after 7 years of being an investment banker, which sucked. All right. I mean,
what part of it?
all of it, the hours.
All of it, the hours.
Yeah, all of it. All the 100 hours a week sucked.
Jeez.
But I learned a lot. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do some of the things I do now if I didn't have that background, that training. So at the end of being able to take it, right? So I tried to quit investment banking numerous times, and kept getting roped back into it. At the end of that time period, there was a family office here in Dallas, where we are today, that wanted to invest in startups. And I wanted to try investing in startups as well. And so they hired me. We created a vehicle called Deep Space Ventures, and we went out and invested in startups. Made 25 investments over about a 3-year period, and 8 of those were in esports.
Okay.
So
what were the other ones in?
All kinds of stuff, mostly B2B software, SaaS.
Yeah.
We did a little bit of healthcare. We did some consumer, but most of our consumer exposure was through gaming, through esports, mostly B2B, selling software to companies that make their company run better.
SaaS, software as a service.
That's right.
SaaS.
Yeah.
Just looked it up in my head right now. I'm like, what was that? All right. That's cool. So tell me about like the most exciting investment that you were most passionate about when you guys went into the first investments.
Man, that's a tough one. There's really, I'm going to have to give you 2 answers here. There's the investment that you make that you think can generate the most return, money, make the most money in. And then there's the investments that you get the most excited about because you're going to have the most fun with, and you may make money, but you may not make as much money. As far as returns go, what's funny is that usually going into it, when I think it's going to be a home run, it isn't. And usually when I think I'm doing this because it seems all right, but I'm not sure, some of those turned out to be our biggest wins. And then, as far as those go, there's several. I mean, we invested in one that ended up doing actually really well. That helps people build credit.
Okay.
Not sexy, but it was called Self Lender. It's called Self now. Funny thing, I was up in Park City 2 weeks ago skiing, and I saw a commercial on TV for the company, and I was like, I know those guys.
Yeah.
That's cool. A cool feeling. I was very excited about that one. It's doing very well. We invested in Play VS in the gaming space, which I never expected to do as well as it's done on paper. So we'll see how that one continues to play out. And I think the most hype investment I made as far as expecting to have a good time in it was Optic. I mean, I was the most excited about making that deal happen.
Did you know about Optic before you made that investment, or did you come across it through research?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a fan of Optic for not since 2008, but for quite some time. Knew of Optic for quite some time. I knew of you for quite some time. And so for me, I remember when the opportunity to invest in a team came about, that the group that I was working with wasn't going to invest in Optic. It was going to be another team. And then I wasn't excited. And when the person who put Infinite together, ultimately came to me and said, hey, it's actually going to be Optic, I had no more questions.
That was Chris Chaney.
Yeah, that's right.
And because originally it wasn't going to be that. I think it was going to be like
Evil Geniuses.
Yeah, it was going to be
Evil Geniuses, which nothing
wrong
with.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, nothing there. Just I wasn't that stoked about it. And then when Chris called me up and said, hey, it's actually not going to be EG, it's going to be Optic, I was like, I'm in. I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't have any questions for you.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. And then I met you at a Gears of War event, and I was like,
when? Oh yeah.
It was that Dallas one. Yeah. It was right after you guys had come here.
Yeah.
I don't even think you were living here yet. I don't think you had the house in Frisco yet.
No, I think I was in Uptown.
That's right.
One Uptown Apartments.
Yeah.
Best, like the bachelor pad, but was not a bachelor, so like it wasn't that cool, but you still felt cool.
Yeah.
7th floor, overlooking like I think it was McKinney and Olive Street.
Yeah.
There was like 4 bars near there, and like on Friday, Saturday, you couldn't go to sleep because even on the 7th floor, all windows shut. AC on, TV on, you still heard the Ferraris and the Lambos just like roaring through the streets, which was cool. Nightlife, if you're, Matty.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, if you're Matty, not this, 40-year-old man father of 9, if you include the dogs.
Yeah, you count the dogs.
But yeah, that's where we first met. It was the Gears of War one, and it was cool. That experience. Did you ever go to a Call of Duty one?
I've been to a couple Call of Duty ones, but it was not in my not in my investing days, it's just in the past.
In the past, yeah,
as a fan,
because the Gears of War ones, as passionate I am about Gears of War and that community and that team, obviously, like it didn't really blow up. It hasn't really blown up. It will.
There was something special about those tournaments, though.
Yeah,
Call of Duty is fun.
Yeah.
It's let's go Optic. I mean, there's an amazing vibe at the Call of Duty events. But man, at Gears of War, I mean, kids are coming over the screens at each other.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's special.
Yeah, very, very special. And as we were going through that sort of thing through the Infinite days, where did you get word that things weren't going necessarily the way that things were planned? As an investor, were you filled in on that? Or because I wouldn't have told you if you know what I mean? Like
I could just tell. I knew things weren't right. And I would go and meet with other investors that were in the group, and it was kind of obvious that things weren't right. Things didn't look right. I mean, for me personally, I invest in a lot of startups. I know what a lean early stage startup needs to look like, what the financials need to look like, what the office needs to look like, the team, the operations, everything. And it always blew me away when I walked into the building over here, and there were 60, 70 people in there. And I was like, 60, 70 people? That's a lot of people. How are you paying for this? I think the numbers never made sense to me. And I was concerned, but I also, again, it was one of those investments. I really enjoyed being in it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the friendships I had with some of the players.
Yeah. I
enjoyed having them carry my lame ass through PUBG and all the other games that I played with them and making me look good.
Shout out 17 and HiPod.
Yeah, HiPod made me. I mean, I had a positive KDA in PUBG because of that guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed being in the Optic world, but man, the investment never made sense the way it was, the way the business was being run, and it was actually really hard to get answers, and I felt like it was one of those things where there were a lot of people in positions of being in charge. There was a CEO and there were investors and they were in charge, but nobody actually was in charge and no one was actually making decisions. And when things weren't going well, it felt like a lot of finger pointing and blaming, which I think that is what ultimately caused the outcome that happened. Just people wanting to, I don't want to name names, but
no, of course
a lot of,
yeah.
It was an incredible opportunity that was just soured by people, honestly, that didn't know how to run that kind of business.
Yeah. In retrospect, a lot of things could have been done. I was just talking to Julian, the Obey guy. You met him.
Oh, yeah.
I was just talking to him on the podcast yesterday or a couple of days ago. And, one of the things that I said to myself was like, man, imagine if I would have said no right away, or imagine if I would have walked away from Optic the way that I walked away this last time, and ultimately, seeing what happened at the end, and maybe expedited that process a little bit more to like make them see that I'm like, yo, let me do this thing, like trust me, I know how to. I've been doing it. Just let me turn the dial. You guys can still do whatever. Just let me turn the dial a little bit. But at that point, I think too many people were like sort of in between me and the decision maker at the time, which was Cheney, and a lot of things. And I'm not talking about Optic J here, so people don't misconstrue this. But there were a lot of layers between me and Chris Cheney, and now that Chris Cheney and I talk like almost regularly, I tell him like, I wonder what would have happened if you and I just would have just sat together for call it 2 days straight.
Oh my gosh, it would have been a different outcome.
Yeah,
it would have been a different outcome because Chris is a fantastic guy. He's hyper intelligent, and people throw words like that around. That guy is smart, and he means well. And I think I said he's a good guy, and he is.
Yeah.
And I think if you that combination with your knowledge, your passion, could have built something really amazing.
I agree.
I think that there were people that were involved and given too much control that wanted it to be something that it shouldn't have ever been.
Yeah.
It was a media business that somebody was trying to make be a sports team. And esports teams, while they are called sports teams by definition in the name, they're not. They're content creation businesses. And it just...
At least for the time being.
Yeah, for now.
Yeah.
And certainly then, and the people that were telling the people that were telling the people to tell Chris what to do didn't get it.
Yeah.
And that message was getting watered down in that convoluted chain of command.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about that nonstop, right? I do think that by now, with all of the resources that we had we allocated them to what I thought we should have been allocating them to, I think that we would have had like a massive business in our hands. But you know what? We live and we learn, and you know, both he and I, you know, have said that, you know, it's like, you know what, it's in the past. Let's, you know.
And I have nothing negative to say about Chris. I mean, Chris is a fantastic guy. He's a friend. We get together. He's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it survived longer because he was there.
Mm-hmm.
He has such a cool head and is so even keeled. I think he kept all of the factions at the table and gave it the best chance that it had.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't going to work.
He just didn't keep the right faction, Matty. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. I mean, yes, that's correct. I mean, you built something from the ground up at 6050 Russell Drive that sustained itself like a startup, that took the cash that came in and redeployed it to grow it like a startup. You ran it lean and you grew it into something that was very valuable. The people who took a hold of it lost that.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost that because you weren't in charge. And I'm not just saying that because we're here hanging out. I mean, that's just me as someone who evaluates deals and why they do well or why they fail so that I can get better at investing. That's my evaluation of what happened.
Yeah. I'm such a big nerd about this thing. I've never been a bigger nerd about anything. Like, I love graffiti. That's my thing. But like, I feel like in this space or in this thing that we do, like, I know all the answers. And when that happened, I felt like a little bit unaligned with myself, because that was the first time that I felt like I was on a weird path, or like on a path to failure that I've never been in esports, right? Everything that I've always done has been thought out over and over, and with cool, like, what would make them happy to see, you know, this video, or what would make them happy to read this news line. And when that happened, I'm like, man, this is like immediately I knew, I'm like, fuck, what, how can I fix this thing, right? And, you know, to everyone's credit that was involved with that, like, that was too much for anybody to handle, in my opinion.
It destroyed relationships, man. We talked about this a few minutes ago, and I don't want to say anything negative about Jay, but that night at the E3 party, when I was talking to him and you walked up and you guys were like oil and water away from each other, dude, that broke my heart, man. Like, legit relationships were destroyed because you couldn't just get in a room with a decision maker and do what you just said, which is, hey, it's not going right, let's fix it. And if you keep it lean like a startup, you can. But when you have 60 people all of a sudden on the payroll overnight, you can't do that anymore. No. You're not that nimble. It was the structure of the business that put it in a position where it couldn't succeed. Yeah. And destroyed relationships.
Yeah. So again, you know, with that, I mean, now that I have Optic back, like, I'm a little bit more willing to have a discussion about it. But at the time, I just couldn't, because there was this massive thing that, you know, the thing that I built, the thing that, you know, I fell in love with, the thing that I wanted to work on most in my life, like, wasn't a thing. I had to point my finger at someone, and although pointing the finger at myself as well, like, I knew that there were certain situations that could have been just like done completely different. So,
and there were several points along the way where it could have been, the ship could have been righted. It just wasn't.
Yeah, you're so tall that I saw you in that crowd. And the thing is like, I was already in bed. Right, I was already in my apartment, or because
we left the YouTube party, and I think it was like, I don't remember who, like Sundance and Jay and a couple other folks, and I think you went to the hotel and we went over to this other thing.
3BD, 3 Black Dot.
Yeah, and
shout out Luke Stapleton.
And then the graffiti artist was there.
Yeah,
and you were like, Alex holy Party. Shit, I'm coming back.
You see this little, what do you call it? The candy corn.
Yeah,
that's him, and then the half-faced guy back there is one of my favorite artists of all time.
Yeah.
Collected all of his magazines, and
you're back in the room eating out of the candy jar or whatever in the room, and
watching my programs like a good old man.
You're chilling,
and then I get a call from my best friend Michael Diesel Carr, and he's like, "Yo, Alex Party is here."
Right, Mike was there,
and I was like, get the fuck out of here. And as I'm like talking to him, I'm like getting dressed. I'm like, I don't want to go. He's like, dude, come. I'm like, I don't want to go. I'm getting ready. And I'm like, all right, fuck it, I go. So I get dressed. I show up. And I get there, go through the
and
line.
he's painting, and you're just sitting there talking to him while he's chilling painting.
Yeah,
you guys, you're like fanboying over this.
Yeah. I was.
I remember that. I remember being like, "Hey, can we hang out?" Like, okay, talk to the painter.
Yeah, I was going between the 3 taco trucks that were there.
Those were good tacos.
And the artist. I didn't even talk to Diesel now, but I saw you in the middle of the crowd. I'm like, oh, that's Steve. I'm gonna go say what's up. And then as I go, it's like as the crowd clears, I see that you're talking to Jay, and I was just like, I'm good. I fucking went this way because I knew that you were gonna be like, dude, sit down in a room and talk. And at the time, I was just not ready for something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk a little bit more present. Actually, give me a few seconds. I'm going to say hello to the sponsors. Sure. DoorDash, coming back from the... I mean, I cannot tell you how happy I am with DoorDash and how they've supported the podcast. Obviously, having that sort of sponsorship and the support allows me to be able to, continue to pay Maddie his expensive salary and continue to travel the world when we're able to go interview other people. So just a personal shout out to them. Thank you so much. But I wanted to let you know a little bit more about them. Okay, so... Whether you forgot that one thing at the store, now you can get snacks, drinks, and household essentials in 30 minutes with DoorDash. Dinner? Check. Deodorant? Check. Morning pick-me-up from Dunkin' Donuts? Check. Get everything you need when you need it with DoorDash. If you want Chinese, if you want pizza, if somebody else wants froyo, there's something for everyone on DoorDash. And this new year means a new you. But when it comes to what you're craving, maybe that's still the old you. That's certainly the case for me. Order your old favorites and try something new with DoorDash. Because DoorDash connects you with restaurants you love right now, right to your door. And now you can get the grocery essentials you need with DoorDash too. Get drinks, snacks, and other household items delivered to you in under an hour. Ordering is easy. Okay, you open the DoorDash application, you choose what you want, where you want it from, and your items will be left safely outside of your door with the new contactless delivery drop-off setting. With over 300,000 partners in the U.S., Puerto Rico, Canada, and Australia, you can support your neighborhood go-tos or choose from your favorite national restaurants like Popeyes, shout out Popeyes, Cheesecake Factory, etc., etc. And right now, for a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off. 25% off. This is new. 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when you download the DoorDash application and enter code Eavesdrop 2021. That's 25% off, up to 10% value, and 0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash application in the App Store and enter code EAVESDROP 2021. Don't forget, that's code Eavesdrop with 2021 at the end of it for 25% off your first order of DoorDash. I mean, do you need a better deal? First order of $15 or more? Who orders anything less than $15? I know I don't. So anyway, again, one last time for the people in the back. Download the DoorDash application, enter code EAVESDROP 2021 for 2021 to get your first order delivery free and also 25% off. That's a super good deal. All right. So thank you to them one more time, and then let's get back to my man, Stephen. So yeah, huge shout out to DoorDash again for sponsoring the podcast like every single time. Like literally almost every time. It's like my biggest sponsor I've ever had, I think. Personal sponsor. So thank you again to DoorDash. All right, so more present time. Obviously, in this current day and age, mental health is becoming a little bit more of the norm to talk about and try to get help for. Mm-hmm. I was talking about it yesterday with Julian, how I bottle everything in and I feel alone sometimes because I just want to have the burden all on me. I operate better that way. I don't think I'll ever change. But now more and more, like people are openly talking about their anxieties, right? Like Nate Shot for a very long time didn't talk about his anxiety, even though it was always there. From the time that he moved to 60/50 all the way till he ultimately ended up leaving Optic and Illinois and going to LA to pursue his life there. Mm-hmm. Jack talks about his anxiety all the time. Like a lot of people are more willing to talk about it. Do you think that that's why it's being more accepted? That people are like, you know what? Yeah, that is fucked up. I wouldn't. There are people that unfortunately can't walk, and that is a sort of something they can't control, right? It's just what it is. Your mental health is just the exact same way, I imagine.
I think we had this perception of it for a long time that it was something wrong with us, that we were broken, and that it was embarrassing to admit it. And Like if I break my ankle and I go to the emergency room and I get a cast on my foot and I go to school the next day or go to work the next day, people are signing my
Yeah.
cast. And if it's Cobra Kai, it's like girls, the guy's drawing whatever. But you know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
when we have physical pain and physical hurt and physical illness, we don't have any problems telling our friends that, hey, I got this cast on, I got this happen, this twist my ankle playing basketball, I was making this awesome play. But when our mind is hurting, when we don't feel good, when we're depressed, when we're anxious, we, for whatever reason, as a society, we just don't talk about it. We hide it, we bottle it up, and I think that that's been changing for a number of years. I think a lot of it has to do with in recent years, you've seen a lot of celebrities come out and say, I went to rehab. I've been sober. Rob Lowe's been sober 30 years. Eminem's been sober 12, 13 years now. His sponsor is Elton John, who's been sober for over 20 years. So a lot of these celebrities are coming out and saying, hey, I want to talk about this. And so then the public has started talking about it.
Yeah.
And as we talk about it, every time someone talks about it, more and more people go, oh, well, it's okay for me to talk about it. It's okay for me to maybe ask for help. And so I think as the stigma around mental health and addiction decreases, the conversation has amped up, and that's a good thing. It's a really good thing, but we're still nowhere near where we need to be. I mean, it's still very uncommon when people need help that they ask for it.
And it's messed up because when you look at somebody with a cast, you're like, oh, you broke your elbow. You can say there's something wrong. Right, when he can't play basketball because obviously the arm. It's noticeable why he can't play basketball.
That's right.
But there's crippling depression that doesn't allow you to get out of bed.
That's right.
There's depression, the sort of depression that just really it's just you alone in this thing and everything's foggy. Right. From what I've been obviously reading and understanding, I'm very blessed to not have those. I do think that I have something in me that that allows me to operate in any situation, no matter how much burden I'm carrying with me. And I'm very lucky to be able to do that. But I know that it isn't. I've seen people break because of it.
I've had it myself. I mean, I went to rehab in 2018, and when I got home, I couldn't get out of my bed for 90 days, almost 3 months. I could not get out of the bed. Could not do it. It felt like there was a pile of bricks on my chest, and I could not put my feet on the ground to do anything other than eat or go to the bathroom or stay up all night playing video games. Seriously though, like I couldn't get out of bed during the daytime. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah. What was it? Were you able to identify what the triggers
for me? Yeah. I mean, I spent 17 years living in addiction, and I had these coping mechanisms, alcohol and drugs, that allowed me to cope with the crap in my life that mostly I caused for myself. And I had just gotten back from rehab, and all those coping mechanisms had been taken away, but life still was hard. I had no idea how to deal with life on life's terms without those coping mechanisms. And it planted me in bed for 90 days. Couldn't move. It was hard. It sucked.
How did you, like, post rehab and you being in bed, like what finally did it? What made you say, you know what?
Yeah.
Time to tie my shoes.
This guy called me one day and he said, his phone rang. This dude named Bob calls me up. Bob's Steak and Chop House. That Bob actually calls me up and he's like, hey man, I heard about your story. I heard about what's happened in your life. I want to meet with you. I've been through something similar. And I was like, I don't believe you, but okay. I mean, fine, I'll go. And I don't know why I answered the phone, why I agreed to. I went and met this guy at a coffee shop and he sat down and I was like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you've read the stuff about me online. Like, you obviously know my story. Like, what are we doing here? That guy sat down for 30 minutes and told me his story. And in his story, I saw myself. I saw a guy addicted. I saw a guy acting out, a guy doing stupid shit. I saw a guy destroying his own life. I saw myself in his story. And then he told me about being 9 years sober and how he had, for him, he had come to be a believer. And faith had been a big part of his recovery. And he invited me to a Bible study. And I was like, I mean, I grew up in church. Yeah. I grew up in the Baptist church here in Texas, for better or for worse. For those of you, some people think that's great, some people don't. And I thought, man, I'm not going back to that. And Bob said, look, come to this Bible study. you probably need a job. There's a lot of good guys there. You should just come hang out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I agreed. I said, okay, I'll go check it out. And I went and I showed up, told my story to these guys, older guys, all dressed nice, and kind of thought they were going to look at me like I was just, some homeless idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys didn't reject me. They were like, dude, good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Good for you for getting sober.
Yeah.
And I was like, really?
Yeah.
Like, you don't think I'm a loser? Like, and these guys are like, no, I'm 25 years sober. I'm this, I'm that. And these guys started telling me their story. And I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, people talk about this.
So you saw yourself as a homeless dude, even though you're a successful entrepreneur who has built a life around, has built a career around money and being able to invest in that. And you saw yourself as a homeless person when you were meeting these people after that?
I had no value for my own life when I went to rehab. I tried to take my own life. That's how I ended up in rehab.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a really dark place, and I tried to take my own life. And my wife and my father saved my life and got me to rehab.
Mm-hmm.
So over 17 years of addiction and being an absolute idiot, I had lost all sense of value for myself. So yeah, that's how I viewed myself. And I think that's how a lot of people feel when they're in that place, is they don't have any value for themselves. And like, getting them to realize they do have value is really hard. You can't just sit down and say, hey man, you're valuable. Like, you should, like, come on, man, snap out of it. Like, fuck, dude, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
For me, the way it worked was some guy who'd walked down the path that I was on said, hey, I've been on that road, and if you take a left here as opposed to a right, things can go better for you. And I just started taking one step at a time, and things started to get better.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I had a lot of haters out there for some of the stuff that I've done and some of the mistakes that I've made, and that's fine. But nobody hated me more than I did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ultimately what led me to get help, was that I hated myself enough to not want to be around.
And then today you said how many days sober?
Oh man, I've stopped counting the days. It's 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
Yeah.
That's good, man. Good for you.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I honestly, when I tell people that, I'm shocked when I say it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think that was possible.
Yeah.
I remember my wife and my father found me in a hotel room in Las Vegas. And I was in bad shape. They got me back home to Dallas. And a couple days later, I went to rehab. And in those couple days, I remember thinking to myself, like, life's going to suck. I'm going to rehab.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never going to drink again. I'm never going to do drugs again. I'm never going to party. No more Vegas. No more girls. No more, like, what the fuck am I going to do? Life's going to suck.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that you could have this really incredible life without those things.
Yeah.
I thought those things were the only things, because those are my coping mechanisms.
For the stresses of the daily grind, or
for unresolved trauma, for the stress of the daily grind, for just life in general. I had never talked to anybody. I'd never gotten help. And, one of the things I learned in rehab was that, there were things that happened to me earlier in my life that I had no control over, that put me in kind of on this path.
Yeah.
And once I resolved some of those things and got help with those things, which was really hard to do.
Yeah.
Really hard to do.
Yeah.
I mean, life changed.
Yeah.
Everything changed.
Going to, our almost weekly breakfast together just to, talk business and just, get, your input on some, on whatever, really made me want to have this conversation with you, because I never saw you at your worst. Never. I always seen this Stephan Hayes.
Yeah.
Always. Every single time we met, this is what it was. And I think as we were having this conversation, so you're telling me about how you have sort of gone from, that part of your life and then utilizing all of your knowledge from the investment stuff and saying, you know what, there's a lot of people like me out there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start trying to invest in that, or help people invest in this, or help startups in the mental health space, get funding.
Yeah.
I thought to myself, there has to be a bunch of people that listen to my podcast that need to hear some of the stuff that you have to say. You yourself have a podcast?
Yeah, I have a podcast called the Stigma Podcast. We talk about addiction. We talk about mental illness. We talk about building companies in that space. We talk to clinicians. We talk to CEOs. We talk to some of my friends in rehab that come on and talk about their recovery journey.
Yeah.
So we talk about anything that has to do with addiction or mental health differences on that show. And it's honestly, creating that content has been good for me. It's been healthy.
Yeah.
It's a part of me trying to help other people. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah. It's good. It's good to have a platform to vent, right? To get as many opinions as you want, even the unwanted ones that you
That's
don't
right.
want to hear. And I think it's good. I think it's brave, right? Because the internet is not a friendly
No.
friendly place. It's not a forgiving place either, right? So whatever has happened in the past, like people will latch onto that and not
For
give
sure.
somebody a second shot. Um, I I don't know why, but like out of all the stuff that has gone by in the last couple of years, I think that for you something silver lining is what you're living right now, right? You
Yeah.
helping startups whose sole purpose of being a business is to help people with this
That's
mental
right.
health stuff. Like that's got to be, I don't know, it's got to be,
It's cool, man. It's
yeah,
not
good.
work.
No.
It's not work. When I got out of rehab, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Like I said, I spent those 3 months just laying in bed. And eventually, a few months after that, I had this idea. I called a friend of mine that I went to rehab with,
Mhm.
and he was an entrepreneur. He had just sold his business. And in that post selling period, he had ended up overdosing and found his way to rehab. And I called him up and said, "Hey, what am I going to do?" And he said, "Hey, there's a lot of entrepreneurs building in the mental health space, and you have a lot to offer them. Go find them and help them."
Mhm.
I was like, "That's a great idea." And in early 2019, I went out to the Bay Area. I was, sleeping on people's sofas, and I was kind of homeless. I mean, I wasn't homeless, but I was kind of slumming around.
Mhm.
And I met a ton of entrepreneurs passionate about what I was passionate about. They had lived through it themselves. And I said, "Well, I want to help." And I realized they were having a hard time getting funding.
Mhm.
There was no investor out there that was dedicated to mental health startups and funding them. There were
Mhm.
a lot of people that had put money into it, but one off here and there. It was kind of maybe they invested in healthcare broadly, so they dabbled in mental health. And I had this idea, well, I'll start a fund. I'll
Mhm.
go out and raise money, and I'll invest in these companies. And I spent most of 2019 trying to raise a traditional venture fund. And
What does that look like?
I went out and tried to raise about $20 million from limited partners who would give me, the capital, and that I would go out and find the startups and I would deploy it into the startups and then help those companies grow. And then hopefully one day those companies would go public or they would be bought or something would happen where I could then take a profit from that equity that I owned in that company and pay it back to my limited partners in my fund. And I got laughed at, dude. Like, family office after family office, investor, high net worth, everybody just
A family
laughed at me.
office, for those who don't know, is
Yeah, a family office is just a high net worth individual who their job is deploying their wealth into investments.
Yeah.
For the most part. I mean, that's a simple definition.
right. So to give you an example, let's say pick Johnny YouTuber who's making $15 million a year. He can hire an investor for his own thing, and that investor will hire a secretary. That investor will hire analyst. That's his office, so that's his family wealth's office.
Yeah, it's like a private equity firm or a venture firm. It's a professional investing business.
Yeah,
that
work
only
for one
invests the
individual.
family's money.
Yeah.
So that's who you go pitch when you're trying to raise a venture fund, and for the most part. And so I was out pitching these people, and they loved the idea, but I didn't really prepare for this one question, which was, "Hey man, you want me to give you 20 million bucks? Cool. You're going to deploy it into mental health. Also cool. You're going to hang on to it for 10 years and you've been out of rehab for 6 months? Like, how the hell is that going to work?" I remember being like, "Yeah, I forgot to put that slide in the deck."
Yeah.
And, the question they'd asked me was, "Well, how do I know you're not just going to run off to Vegas and be an idiot?"
Yeah.
I remember thinking, like any good addict in recovery would tell you, it's one day at a time. And I remember telling them, I'm sober one day at a time. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
And that's not
No.
going to fly.
No.
You wouldn't give me your money. And so this one investor eventually in October 2019, he said, "Hey, listen, go out there and find deals. Create a syndicate. Don't try to take capital from people. Just go find deals. And once you find a good deal, go call these investors that you've been in front of and tell them, hey, do this one deal with me." And so I said, "Okay, that sounds terrible. Sounds like a lot of hard work without getting paid, but I'll do it." So I started What If Ventures as a syndicate.
What If Ventures?
Yeah, What If Ventures. I always had this idea for this name. A good friend of mine went to Naval Academy, and he and I were out one night, and we saw this bright pink neon sign that just said "What If ... And this was, I don't know, years and years ago. And we always kind of talked about what a great idea for the name of a venture firm.
Yeah.
Just what if you could do this, and
Yeah.
what if you could do that? So I had this name brewing in the back of my head, and when I decided to start my own, I said, well, I'm going to use that
What
really
if?
cool name that my
Really
friend
good.
came up with, because he's not using it. So shout out to my boy Brady for giving me the name of my fund.
Yeah.
And I started it as a syndicate. And what that means is, went out and looked for opportunities to invest. And when I found one, I pitched it to my investors, and they had the option to invest with me or to not invest. And there's no penalty for doing or for not doing. We did our first deal in January of 2020. I had about a dozen or so investors that said yes to invest with me. And the bulk of the money for that deal came from really 3 people who really wanted to support me. One's a family office here in town in Dallas that actually invests in a lot of esports. And a couple of others are actually most of the money came from esports investors that I knew, actually 80-90% of it. And that wanted to help me out. And, fast forward to today, it's the end of January 2021, that dozen investors has grown to about 3,000, a little over 3,000, actually closer to 3,500 now.
3,500 investors?
Yeah, it's kind of wild.
How do you manage like that many people?
And
I'm assuming
it's
since
not
there's
easy.
Since there's 3,500, there's people that invest $10,000.
1,000, 5,000,
okay.
10,000. My average check into a deal is $15,000. And I have some people that write $250, $500, $750, $1,000 checks.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of people writing $1,000, $2,500, and $5,000 checks. Not all those 3,000 people invest. A lot of them are just hanging out. They want to see the deals. They're looking and seeing. It's intriguing. They think my emails that I send out are entertainment. So that's fine, which is great because I'm educating them on mental health, and that's destigmatizing. So even if they don't invest, I'm still accomplishing one of my missions by just having them on the email list. A few hundred, about 10%, 15% of those people have written an actual check. So it's really a few hundred people that have deployed the capital.
Yeah.
But through today, we have invested in about 13 companies. We've deployed a little over $7 million into the space in the last 13 months.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I never thought that was possible.
Yeah. You're almost halfway there to the 20 that you wanted.
If I'd raised a $20 million fund, I wouldn't be deploying this much per year. I'd be deploying actually less, in smaller checks into fewer deals.
Yeah.
So, one of the components of recovery, of being sober, I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous, is there's 12 steps. And the 12th step is about service. It's about doing things for other people, helping other people in recovery. And doing this the way I'm doing it is part of that. Yes, I stand to profit. I charge a carried interest. If one of my companies makes a ton of money and all my investors make a ton of money, I get a percentage of that profit. So I am absolutely doing this for profit. Don't get me wrong. I have kids in school, little kids, and I got a mortgage to pay. So I got to make some money to pay. I feel like Biggie. I got to make some money to feed my daughter. But I mean, it's a lot of what I'm doing is about recovery. It's about living in that 12th step and trying to help other people. And so, if I can educate people, if I can deploy capital to companies that will help other people, if I can help an entrepreneur who's struggling in their own recovery, if I can be helpful, it helps me.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that for the longest time. Zach Williams is a friend of mine. His father, Robin Williams, he came on my podcast. That's actually how I met him, because of the podcast. And we became friends after I interviewed him. And he told me something on that podcast. He said, look, I was sick after my dad killed himself. He said, I started helping other people. And the first thing he did, he went up to San Quentin prison and taught finance to people in prison. And he said that going up and the act of being of service made him feel like, man, I got to stop. I got to stop doing the stuff I'm doing. I got to stop using. I got to stop doing whatever the things that he was doing. And it just kind of struck me, And I found that to be true, man. Being of service to other people tears down whatever bullshit's in your life. I think it's the best medicine. Yeah. And so I stand to make a profit from these deals, but this is a lot of this is about service. I mean, the podcast, we don't have sponsors. A lot of it because we probably couldn't get them, but also because it's a service. I mean, I want to help. So being in recovery, going to meetings every day, sponsoring other guys, it's a big part of my life. And so What If Ventures, and I want it to always stay this way. It's hard to manage that many investors. It'd be cool to have a fund. It'd be cool to charge management fees. It'd be cool. All that stuff would be cool. But I don't know. That's not the mission. The mission is to help people.
Yeah. Are there any other companies that you currently invested in, focused on competition, esports, or sports?
Yeah, I mean, look, I invested in 8 esports companies from Deep Space Ventures. I have not invested in esports since then. However, there are several really cool companies in the mental health space that are building video games as digital therapeutics.
Okay.
So a video game, there's one company called Achille Interactive. Adam Ghazali is the founder. It was on my podcast a couple months ago. He went through the FDA and got approval to prescribe his video game as medicine to treat ADHD in children. And that's the first. There are many others that are being built.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of people. I'm just looking around the hex quarters here. A lot of people playing games, sitting in front of screens, spending a lot of time on the games. And it turns out that those games can be therapeutic. While there are some downsides to some games, there's a lot of upside. And I think that you're going to see a lot of digital therapeutics come to market. You're going to see video games that make people better.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see a lot of that. And I certainly intend to invest in that.
Yeah, I mean, I see that now. I think and this is obviously a completely different topic, but like with homeschooling Olivia, like I see the benefit of having those applications like readily available. So obviously kids by nature are more playful. They're more, hands-on. This is how I learn. And identifying what best learning process for them is like pivotal in their learning experience. My wife and I are super anti, traditional schooling because we experienced it the wrong way. And like I had an actual counselor of mine say, "You're not going to college, right?" She made an assumption that I wasn't going to go to college, so why take the ACTs or the SATs? And I said to myself in my head, I'm like, "You're not supposed to be saying that." You know what I mean? Like in my head, I knew that.
Why would she say that?
Well, she didn't want to waste her time. She doesn't get paid enough, right? She's got problems, I'm sure. So I figured that this is something that's going on across the United States. Our teachers don't get paid what they should be paid for an important job that is to grow this. And when and you're seeing it now more than ever, like study after study after study showing how schools are building, robots and assemblymen and yes men instead of, nurturing their entrepreneurship, nurturing their artistic selves. You know what I mean? Like there is a living that you can make off of something that you love doing, especially in this day and age with the internet. So I can only imagine what the future looks like. So we made a very, very educated, conscious choice on how we were going to let our daughter be educated. From a social standpoint, obviously she's got, sports and stuff. Maybe not right now because of COVID, but playing games that teach is the easiest way to make somebody learn anything.
There's some really cool studies out there. I mean, Dr. Ghazali, who was on my podcast, he has done a lot of research that's been, published and vetted by all kinds of journals that shows that, for treating Alzheimer's, if you get an adult playing a video game, there's significant cognitive advantages, and then cognitive recall improves and increases as you start to play video games. And so there's a lot of people out there trying to build video games that push off Alzheimer's, or there's video games out there that are trying to help people with ADHD, like we've seen already. I think video games and mental health will merge. And I think it'll be really healthy. I think there's a lot of good, and I think there's a lot of people in the gaming community, in the gaming world that need it.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, look, I play League of Legends. I mean, anybody who's ever played League knows it's pretty toxic in the chat. It's pretty toxic in the community. And that's not because these people are bad people. They just don't have an outlet. And they probably need some help.
Yeah.
And so we should bring it to them in a format that they like, which is in the format of a video game.
I would have never went to business school because my grades wouldn't have allowed me to go to business school. But I've become a very successful businessman just because of the space that I'm in that has made me want to learn business. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in that scenario, like if you make that applicable to anybody that's a photographer who loves photography, like they'll learn whatever it is that they need to learn in order to make their passion their lifestyle. So I think that's like super important, and that's something that at some point or another we as a country or as a human race have to take that into account. Yeah. Because it's just needed at this point, right? Like we know way too much. There's so much information out there that we should be able to reassess what we're educating in schools to.
Well, I think our education system was built for the 20th century. It was built for the General Motors plant and the Ford plant. It was built to create people that could be cogs in a wheel that mass-produced machinery. That's not what our economy is anymore. I mean, you and I have talked about this at length. this is a content creation first economy. The businesses that sell widgets, they create content in order to be able to sell widgets. The businesses that sell video games create content in order to be able to sell the video game. So being an entrepreneur, creating content, getting out there and doing your own thing, that's what we should be teaching. But we're still stuck teaching kids how to be a cog in a manufacturing economy wheel. The system's really, really broken, in my opinion.
That's the beginning to a very scary AI movie, if you think about it. Like we're teaching kids how to build machines who will one day have the brain to operate its own machinery.
Yeah. It's Terminator.
End of humanity. God damn, you guys are all fucked.
Terminator. Great movies. Love them.
Yeah. So what do you got planned for this year? Obviously, COVID being what it is, have you been able to travel to do your pitches? Have you been able to examine
everything's
businesses?
Everything's been a resume.
Yeah.
Everything's been remote. I've traveled some. I probably traveled twice last year. So I don't know how much I'll travel this year. I think it'll probably pick up later this year, but I don't know. This year our goal is to double what we did last year. Last year we invested in 10 companies, 9 or 10 companies, depending on one of them closed right at the last week of the year. So kind of count it however you want. But, I'd like to invest in, 15, 20 companies this year. I'd like to deploy far more capital. I think that's definitely going to happen. Just this January, we invested in 4 new companies, deployed about $2.5 million, which is 50% of what we did in 2020.
Yeah.
So I think that this year we will do a lot more to help a lot more people, a lot of entrepreneurs bring solutions to market that help other humans. And that's our mission.
And are you solely focused on mental health?
Yeah, basically mental health or addiction, which roll up into behavioral health, the way I think about it.
Okay.
So another way to think about it would be human performance. I want to make humans better.
Yeah.
Like on my website, it says I want to radically change the human experience. And I think that mental health will improve as we do that. Yeah. And so that's the focus. But it's, for us to invest, it needs to have some sort of science, some sort of clinical backing, some sort of thought or proof, or be backed by some kind of research that it can make someone better who is struggling with, either depression or anxiety or whatever else it may be.
Is there one company that you invested in that you're super hype about? Obviously they all have, hold a good place in your heart, but is there one that you're like, that's the optic of this thing? It's gonna be fun.
Yeah. There's a couple. One's called Atai Life Sciences. They just raised a big $100 million Series C round. They're going to go public pretty soon. Or at least that's the word on the street. They may or may not go public.
You can be influencing.
Well, you can't. I'm not Elon, and I'm not going to be tweeting about IPOs. But that one is developing psychedelic treatments. Okay. So they've developed about a dozen psychedelic compounds that have been proven to work to treat things. Treat is actually the word. They don't use that word. They use cure. Cure. So they talk about curing depression, curing anxiety,
like
curing
actually not
addiction,
treating, curing it.
Curing. They use the word cure.
That's very deliberate if they're using
it's bold.
that.
It's very bold.
Yeah, because most people will say, what's something that doesn't get us on the hook for something? Let's find another word.
I remember pitching a tie to my investors, and I remember using the word cure in the email where I said, hey, you should come and invest. And then people are like, cure? I'm like, look at the science, look at the math. Yeah. Like, look at the results these people are getting with these psychedelic drugs.
And when you say psychedelic drugs, are we talking acids, shrooms? What?
Basically, derivatives of. Yeah. We're talking psilocybin, we're talking ibogaine, we're talking ketamine, we're talking analogs and derivatives of the compounds MDMA, LSD.
Really?
And not for recreational use. These things can be abused. They can certainly be abused. But there are derivatives, there are analogs of these root compounds that can be used to do what's called increasing neuroplasticity in the brain. So what happens when you go to therapy and see a therapist is you're trying to change your behavior, trying to almost rewire neuro pathways in your brain so that when this thing happens in your life, instead of your reaction being this thing you always do, you attach a new reaction to something happening in your life. Yeah. And as you get older and as you go through life, you become very rigid in these connections, these neural pathways in your brain. And what psychedelics have been proven to do is to turn your brain for a brief period of time into a little bit softer, kind of like putty. You can mold it a little bit more. So then once you use the psychedelic compound, you conduct the psychotherapy session, the therapy session, and your your brain takes to these neuropathway rewirings a little bit better.
Wow.
That's the magic of these drugs. These drugs, it's not a panacea. You don't take the antidepressant, you don't take the psychedelic drug and all of a sudden you're not depressed anymore.
Yeah.
You take the drug and your body is in a position to where you can take to the therapy.
And you're rewiring it.
That's right. Yeah, better. That's why they're using the word cure, because it can facilitate you getting to the end state faster by doing things like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. So going to see a therapist or a psychiatrist. So I'm pretty excited about that.
I saw an episode of House once where he was getting migraines and he took acid. And he was tripping in the bathroom and he was seeing shit. But, you know, him mentioning that and then you mentioning that in an earlier conversation.
It can be abused. People, I mean, there's going to be, look, it's complicated. But there are incredible solutions coming to market from the psychedelic space. And then another one that we just invested in, the company is using your voice to measure your mental health.
Okay.
So one of the things that I'm most excited about is measurement and testing in the space. We've never measured mental health as a species. We've been measuring physical health for thousands of years. I mean, I went back and looked, and the first earliest recording of a mirror is like 6,000 years ago. So we've been looking in the mirror at ourselves for 6,000 years to figure out how we're doing physically. We don't have a mental mirror. We don't have a measurement. There's nothing that says whether the antidepressant is working. There's literally nothing. And so there are people trying to figure out how to measure mental health, whether it's through different biomarkers. It can be through the way your heart beats. It could be through blood, saliva. It can be through, the way your facial expressions change when certain
tonality of the voice.
So this company is measuring tonality of the voice to determine whether or not you're getting better or worse when it comes to whatever mental health difference you have.
Yeah.
It's
and
incredible.
it's true, right? Like a lot of us have heard when you ask the wife, you ask the girlfriend, is anything okay? The okay and the way they say the okay,
right,
lets you know whether everything's okay or not.
So what they're doing is they're taking that, because like when my wife says, yeah, everything's fine.
Fine. The way you said fine just annoyed me. So fine.
Yeah.
Nothing's fine. Tell me don't tell me tomorrow. Tell me right now.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with it tomorrow. That's 2 days too late.
So yeah, I mean,
you have one chance.
They're basically they've taken that thing that you and I know when our ladies say that, and they've digitized that, and they can measure that.
That's so cool.
And so then they can tell a doctor. I think I was telling you earlier that 85% of antidepressants in the United States are prescribed by primary care physicians. So just regular doctors who've never done anything more than a basic 2 or 3 hour instructional on mental health and through all their years of school.
Yeah.
Theyese people, they're not qualified. They're not unqualified, but they're not equipped to treat mental health, and they don't know how.
Yeah.
And they don't get paid to do it.
Right.
And so some of these tools coming to market could allow those people to do a better job of figuring out what to prescribe, and then when you come back, know if it's working or not. Because you think about it, if I'm depressed, you give me an antidepressant, and then I come back, the only way you measure now is you ask me my opinion.
Yeah. And you're in no position as...
But how the hell am I going to tell you?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like back when I was laying in bed for 3 months, if you'd asked me how I was doing, I said, fine, leave me the hell alone.
Yeah. But there would have been more of a deterrent.
It was not well.
Yeah. And it's not like, give me on a scale from 1 to 10, how much does this hurt on your elbow that's broken?
Yeah.
Or that we assume is broken. You can say it's like, oh, that's a 9 or that's a 10, unbearable. Don't do that again.
I want to go to the party, so it doesn't hurt at all. It's fine, I'm fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
People lie.
Yes.
But that's the thing about...
Everybody lies.
That's the thing about
Dr. House's favorite quote.
That's the thing about these diseases, though, man. They're dangerous in that way. Mental illness, addiction, make no mistake about it. These are sicknesses. These are diseases. They are dangerous. If you could craft the perfect disease to kill the most people on this planet, if you're the devil and you want to just wipe out humans, what would you make? You'd make addiction. You'd make bipolar disorder. You'd make schizophrenia. You'd make depression and anxiety, because these are diseases that kill a lot of people. They never get the credit for it. It's always blamed on a drunk driving accident or a suicide or a obesity, heart disease. It's blamed on something else, but it originated from this thing that no one admits that they have. Their loved ones won't admit it because it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
They won't talk to anyone about it. You can't measure it, detect it, or test for it.
Yeah.
It's the perfect silent killer. And I believe that mental illness, mental health differences, that addiction kills more people than anything else. It just doesn't get the attribution.
No.
Therefore, it's the perfect disease.
Dude, that's so deep. Because you're right? Like more often than not, they're blaming the actual cause of death, but not what caused it to cause that.
The
death.
physical thing that made the heart stop beating was this thing that goes on a form that gets filed somewhere and it becomes a statistic.
Yeah.
What really killed that person?
What drove them to that?
That
drink?
was a byproduct of the thing that led them there.
Jesus, that is deep.
So we want to solve for that.
Yeah, and then you think about the amount of drugs that are currently in the marketplace right now. Like, yeah, they'll solve your issue momentarily, while at the same time fucking up your liver, fucking up your inner,
That's right.
And that to me is a little bit more catastrophic than anything else, right? Because you're sort of putting a Band-Aid that's turning your skin into just dirt.
Yeah, I mean, the antidepressants in the United States is a $15 billion a year market. I'm just going to be honest, man. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I haven't run these studies myself. That shit doesn't work. Some of it does. Sometimes, partially, for a little while, mask a symptom.
Yeah.
But man, the drugs aren't that effective.
A friend of mine, and one of the reasons that I'm getting into the marijuana business is because a friend of mine who was taking Xanax to relax at night after whatever stresses of the day, he said that the second that he gave up on that, he just felt the withdrawals, and it was the worst thing he's ever done. Yeah. He started taking CBD to sort of replace that, and he says that his life has not only been better, but his physical self has also felt, better sleep. You don't wake up with weird pee or whatever. And that to me is like, okay, that there's something there, especially. And you hear this all the time, right? Through gaming and Adderall. And if you take Adderall, you have to take Xanax to come down from it. If you do this, that, and the other, then it's this endless cycle of bullshit when there are, non-traditional medicines that come from, Earth that could be a little bit more. Yeah. And certainly the studies around marijuana have they've been around for a while, but now they're being more publicized because they're starting to, little by little legalizing that. And you sort of see this path of like if pharmaceuticals companies who are making $15 billion a year allowed or didn't pay the government or whoever these agencies are that approve things to test more on natural things. Don't get me wrong, right? Don't Steve Jobs it and say, I don't want modern day medicine. I want to go eat.
There's a medical industrial complex that makes a lot of money every year. And their incentives are not aligned with the average human. One of the things that's happening, though, is psychedelics are illegal, but they will not be forever.
Not in Colorado.
In Oregon, there was a rule that changed. But nationwide, the psychedelic compounds will be removed from what's called Schedule 1 in the next couple of years. It's pretty certain that that's going to happen. But the reason they were banned is really interesting. They were banned for social reasons. Yeah. They were banned because pharmaceutical companies don't want the competition. No. They were banned for a bunch of reasons that don't have anything to do with your and my best interest at heart. What's fascinating to me is that interest is actually starting to realign. A lot of these antidepressants, a lot of the drugs that were developed in the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s, they're coming off like the intellectual property behind those drugs. Yeah. The way drugs work is eventually those drugs become open to the public, basically. Like anybody can copy them and make them. They become generic. And that time period is about to lapse for a lot of these antidepressants. And so now all the pharmaceutical companies are turning and looking at psychedelics going, wow, I could get another couple decades of IP protection around treatment using this thing that I didn't want to see used before because it threatened the drug that I was selling in the past. I
mean, look at the cotton industry with hemp, right?
Yeah,
same thing.
Exactly.
It lasts longer, more durable, more use for it, cheaper. Right. I mean, you name it. So I think that I'm glad that the internet has come about, right? Because of the age of the information has never been stronger than it is right now. And your parents telling you weed is evil, the way that my parents used to tell me, right?
My parents told me rap music was evil.
Yeah, exactly, right. And then you see, you have, the ability to go do the research, have the ability to go to Netflix and see documentaries around it.
Then 60 Minutes did a big special on psychedelics last year. I mean, Tim Ferriss has been covering this on his podcast over and over and over again. I mean, he's interviewed incredible people over the last year in the psychedelic space. I mean, what MAPS is doing out in California, what the studies are doing at Johns Hopkins. I mean, if you type any of this, if you're out there listening to this, if you just type anything I just said into Google and go read the first few things that pop up, your mind will be blown about the research and the work and the science that's been put into the psychedelic space and what these drugs can do to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's mind altering, like pun intended.
It's insane. All right. Well, listen, anything that you want to close the podcast out with? Obviously, all your information is going to be listed down below.
Sure.
Any closing comments?
No, man, I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate you telling this story. I mean, just talking about mental health, talking about addiction, sharing the stories of people that are in recovery, getting that word out there. Someone will listen to this, and someone will see the videos from this recording, and they're going to go, "Yeah, I've been through that. That makes sense to me." And they're going to know there's a place they can reach out. They're going to know that there's help. They're going to know that they can get better. And maybe they see or hear this and they don't go do something about it today. But if they see 3 more podcasts out there in the world that are all talking about the same thing, then they will go get help.
Yeah.
So every time we put this word out there into the universe, it creates momentum for people to get well. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, of course, man. Of course. I'm happy that you're creating content. Obviously, everybody anywhere can create content on things that they're passionate about. You obviously came into the business through esports. You saw all of us preaching content nonstop. So you decided to how often do you release your podcasts?
Oh, man, I was doing 2 a week for a while. Then I started doing it 1 a week. Now I'm doing maybe 2 a month.
Okay.
I've slowed down just because I've gotten busy with other things, but I think I've published episode number 76 this morning.
Okay.
So going to keep cranking out
76.
content.
This is episode number 85. So you're cranking them out.
I'm cranking.
It's
a lot
hard.
of work.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
Yeah, and only on audio right now, right?
I'm doing only audio because I'm not fancy enough.
Okay.
You can be pretty lazy about it and do only audio.
Yeah.
Right. Because I can get on Zencaster.
And it can still work.
And it can still work.
Yeah.
I can get on Zencaster. You can be in California. I can be in New York. We can record. It uploads to the cloud. I send it to some guy. He does the editing. I write the show notes. I publish it. It's a lot less time consuming than doing what you're doing takes a lot of work, more work than what I'm doing.
Yeah. It's a 2-parter, right? I do the easy part, and then Matt gets back there and does
all the hard work.
Yeah, opens his eyes for like 2 hours straight and just make sure that the audio's good.
In his eyes.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Well, man, listen, I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you for sharing your story. Obviously, I hope that anybody out there that is going through something, whether you want to tell people or not, you're not the only one. We're going to put a lot of information down in the description below, including all of yours, your podcast, where to find you, your website, etc. And yeah, I felt it was important to have this because, not only do you have the bridge into esports, but also the way that you've pivoted from investing in things that you loved into things that you're passionate about is like super cool, in my opinion. I'm glad that that we've kept in touch these last couple of years.
Yeah, man.
See your breakfast, extra crispy bacon.
Extra crispy bacon for sure. Yeah.
All right, brother.
Keto.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it. All right, guys. As I said, thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoyed the video, please remember to not leave without leaving a like. If you think somebody can benefit from this podcast, share it with that person. It's just tell them to give it a listen. All of his information is going to be down below. Again, a quick shout out to DoorDash, who sponsored the podcast. And we'll see you guys on the next one for episode number 86, getting closer and closer to the 100th. If you guys have any opinion or any questions, leave them in the description down below or in the comment section down below, and we'll go from there. All right? We'll see you guys on the next one. Goodbye.